Bailey's Story, A Puppy Tale, Chapter 11. I waited patiently for school to be over and done with, and finally it happened. The snow melted, the warm weather came, and one day Ethan jumped off the bus with extra excitement. A few days later, we were off to the farm. The second that the car stopped, I leaped out, racing around the yard, quickly marking my territory in case any other dogs had gotten the wrong idea while I'd been gone. I greeted Flair and barked at the black cat in the barn and the ducks by the pond. They'd produced another batch of ducklings, although I could not imagine why. I raced into the woods, got a whiff of the skunk, and raced back again. If she wanted to play, she knew where to find me. I loved it at the farm, and I loved the happiness that poured out of Ethan when we were there. That second summer, there was one particular night Ethan was happier, more excited, and more anxious than usual. When it was bedtime, he didn't head for the sleeping porch as he usually did. Mom and Grandpa and Grandma didn't go upstairs either. Instead, they all gathered in the living room. I stayed close. They might need my help. Everybody stared at the television, although I couldn't see or smell anything interesting in the small flickering images. Ethan's excitement spiraled up and up. Mom and Grandma and Grandpa were excited too, and stared as well. Pretty soon I was going to have to bark just to share in the feelings. Then, suddenly, all four of them yelled and cheered, and I did bark, and nobody told me not to do it inside the house. Then Ethan took me out into the yard, and we sat down and looked up at the moon. "There's a man up there right now, Bailey," Ethan told me. "See the moon? Someday I'll go there too." He was so happy that I ran off and got a stick for him to throw for me. He laughed. "Don't worry, Bailey. I'll take you with me when I go." Most days on the farm, we did just that, just what we had done the last year. Fished in the pond or played rescue me and wandered in the woods. And I did my tasting job in the kitchen. Sometimes Grandpa would drive into town and he'd ask Ethan if he wanted to go. The boy would say yes, and I'd jump into the car with him. Grandpa liked to go to a place where he sat in a chair and a man played with his hair. There were not enough other boys or dogs there, and Ethan would get bored. We'd wind up walking up and down the streets, looking at windows and hoping to find some friends for me to sniff. The best place to find other dogs was in the park. There was a big grassy area and a pond, although we never played rescue me there. One day, we spotted an older boy and his dog. The dog was a female, short, black, and all business. When I trotted up to sniff her, she didn't even glance at me. Her eyes were on the thin plastic disc the boy was holding in his hand. Then the boy threw it. The dog raced and leaped and caught the disc before it even hit the ground. Pretty impressive, I suppose, if you like that sort of thing. "What do you think, Bailey? Do you want to do that, boy?" Ethan asked, his eyes shining. I found a stick to chew. I bet it tasted better than that plastic thing anyway. When we got home, Ethan went right up to his room and got busy making something he called the flip. "It's like a cross between a boomerang, a frisbee, and a baseball," he told Grandpa when he was finished. "It'll fly twice as far because the ball gives it weight, see?" I sniffed at the thing in his hand, which had been a perfectly good football before Ethan cut it up, and asked Grandma to put some new stitches in it. "Come on, Bailey," Ethan shouted, running outside. Grandpa and I followed. "How much money can you make on an invention like this?" Ethan asked eagerly. "Let's just see how she flies," Grandpa said. "Okay, ready, Bailey? Ready?" I figured something was about to happen and stood alertly. My ears pricked to catch all sound, my tail beating steadily. The boy cranked his arm back and flung the flip into the air, where it twisted and fell from the sky as if it had hit something. I trotted over to sniff at it. "Bring the flip, Bailey," the boy called. Gingerly, I picked the thing up, I remembered the short black dog chasing the plastic disc in the park and felt a little jealous. That disc had soared, and the dog had soared up to meet it. This thing, well, it didn't soar. I took it back over to where the boy was standing and spat it out. Not aerodynamic, Grandpa was saying. Too much resistance. It has to sort of slice through the air. I just need to throw it right, the boy insisted. Grandpa went back inside, and for the next hour, the boy threw the flip again and again and again. I could sense frustration building in him, so after the 10th throw, I left the flip where it had fallen and brought back a stick instead. I figured it would be more fun to throw, and it would definitely be more fun for me to catch. No, Bailey, he said sadly, the flip, get the flip. I barked, wagging, trying to get him to see how much fun the stick would be if he just gave it a chance. Bailey, the flip! And then someone said, Hi! Ethan's head jerked around. The person who had spoken was a girl about Ethan's age. I'd guess, standing next to a bicycle. I trotted over, wagging, and she patted my head. In one hand, she had a basket with something inside it that smelled sweet and dark and rich. I knew that smell. It was called chocolate. But I'd never been allowed to eat any. I sat down, trying hard to look as nice as possible, so she'd hand the basket over to me. What's your name, girl? She asked me. He's a boy, Ethan said. His name is Bailey. I looked over at the boy because he'd said my name. I noticed something odd about him. It was almost as if he were afraid, but not exactly, even though he'd taken half a step backward when he saw the girl. I looked back at the girl. I liked her and her chocolate smell. I wagged. I live down the road. My mom made some brownies for your family. Huh? The girl said, gesturing at the basket with her free hand. Oh, the boy said. I kept my attention on the basket. So, the girl said, I'll get my grandmother. The boy said. He turned and walked inside the house, but I decided to stay with the basket. And the girl, of course. Hi, Bailey, are you a good dog? You're a good dog, the girl told me. Good, but not good enough to get some chocolate, I discovered, even when I gave the basket a nudge with my nose so she'd get the hint. She just laughed and shook her head. Her hair was light-colored and long enough to wave back and forth when she did that. And she, too, seemed the tiniest bit afraid. Of what? The only thing around here that night might make anyone anxious was a poor starving dog who needed a treat. Hannah, Grandma said, coming out of the house. It's so good to see you. Hi, Mrs. Morgan. Come in, come in. What have you got there? My mom made some brownies. I followed Hannah into the house. Well, that's just wonderful, Grandma went on. Ethan, you probably don't remember, but you and Hannah used to play together when you were just babies. She's a little more than a year younger than you. I don't remember, Ethan said, kicking at the carpet. He was still acting oddly. He didn't seem to be in trouble, though, so I took on the duty of guarding Hannah's basket. Grandma set it on a side table next to Grandpa, who was in a chair with a book. He looked at the basket over the top of his glasses and reached in. Do not spoil your dinner, Grandma hissed at him. He snatched his hand back. I looked at him with sympathy, and he looked back at me the same way. Nobody ever let us have any fun. For the next several minutes, Grandma did most of the talking. Ethan stood with his hands in his pocket, and Hannah sat on the couch and didn't look at him. Nobody ate a treat. Finally, Ethan asked Hannah if she wanted to see the flip. At the sound of that horrible word, I whipped my head around to stare at the boy in dismay. I thought we'd moved on. Could it be true that we weren't done throwing that horrible thing around? The three of us went out into the yard. Ethan showed Hannah the flip, but when he threw it, it still fell to the ground like a dead bird. I need to make some design changes to it, Ethan said. I walked over to the flip but didn't pick it up, hoping the boy would decide to end the embarrassment once and for all. Hannah stayed for a while. She went over to the pond to have a look at those stupid ducks, petted Flare on the nose, and took a couple of turns with the flip. Then she got on her bicycle, and as she steered down the driveway, I trotted beside her. The boy whistled for me, and I returned at a dead run. Something told me we'd be seeing that girl again. Maybe she'd bring the basket back with her, too.